conference being hosted by the Parliamentary Elections Office. We do, of course, take the opportunity to apologize for the late start as we dealt with some issues that were just way beyond our control. Nevertheless, we're here and we're happy to have you with us. So good morning to all our colleagues joining us via Zoom. Those of you joining us, the viewers joining us on channel 22 of Facebook page, the YouTube channel, and the live stream, and of course those of you in the diaspora as well. We have with us here Mr. Elvis Morin, the Supervisor of Elections, and as I mentioned, the press conference is being facilitated this morning by the Parliamentary Elections Office. And the press conference is being facilitated this morning by the Parliamentary Elections Office. So without any further ado, I will hand you over to Mr. Morin. Good morning.
Thank you very much, Ms. Johnson, and good morning to the listening and viewing public. And we are very pleased to be part of this engagement this morning, that is to update the public, as to where we are in preparation for the execution of general election that is scheduled to take place on the 23rd of June, 2022.
Go ahead.
Okay. So first of all, I just want to place on record my appreciation, that is for the registration officers as well as the assistant registration officers and everyone involved in the electoral process. Yesterday was our final day for registration, having issued the writ this morning to all the returning officers. And I must say, by all indication, that it was a very taxing day for the officers. And I really want to commend the assistant registration officers, the registration officers, and of course, by extension, the family. And you would understand why I am saying this, because we work way into the night, to make sure that everyone who was at the time in the line at 5, that they were serviced. And we are pleased to say that we were able to accomplish that. It took a lot, for these individuals to sit there, for the registration officers to make sure they marshal what was happening in terms of managing the crowd and so on. But equally important, I want to also say thanks to the public, because generally, people were very accommodating. Of course, there were concerns. People were raising, concern as to why last day and all of that. But the fact remains is that we were able to generally have good control and good response from the public. As a matter of fact, prospective electors were very supportive in managing, the crowd and ensuring that people got, the service that was. So I'm very proud this morning of all my officers and the general public for the effort as to where we are at this time.
So maybe you could...
So, yes, I'm going forward.
Go ahead.
All right. So, as I said, the writ is issued this morning. And all our returning officers are now in place, have taken the oath and so on. And we will proceed to publish tomorrow, that is the wreath. All right, so the wreath will be published tomorrow and, of course, be positioned in the prominent places throughout the constituencies, throughout Grenada, Carriacou, and Peter Matnick. And, of course, the government gazette, as well as at least one of the media houses. So we should have this in the public domain sometime tomorrow. So at this time, I think, I don't know if there's anything else, or maybe I just listen to the comments from the media, but that's where we are, and we go along.
So I think before we get to the media, I think you should maybe just re-emphasize the point again about those who did not get the time to update their ID cards. They still have the opportunity to vote once their names are on the list and they were previously registered.
Okay, good. So let me just emphasize before I go there. So, as I said earlier, the writ is issued, and therefore all registration, replacement of card ceased. So as of now, You do that until after the general elections. We issued in the public domain, of course, some content respective to people who are registered. And first of all, let me make it clear that you have to be duly registered. So someone who is holding presently an expired card and they didn't replace the card, they are duly registered to vote, to participate in the process. We ask that persons, in terms of the first step is that your constitutional right, you're duly registered. To minimize, of course, the issue of voter fraud and so on, we ask that people present the voter's ID, okay? So people ought to present it. And in this regard, we are saying also that if you did not replace your card, then you'll be allowed to present your expired card as well, okay? So that we can identify who you are, to verify who you are. But critical in this is that the registration number, you have a registration number, and that registration number, of course, follow you. So, and it would correspond to what is on the voters list. So we are saying that the expired card is also useful. We are saying also that someone who doesn't have a voter's card, right, and the day, they're not debarred still from participating in the process. So there are a number of questions that will be asked, or the presiding officer would ask of that elector, and of course they would proceed to take an oath, right? And there are categories. So, for example, someone who card lost, your card lost or defaced, or in some cases where one was not issued to you. And let me explain this where one wasn't issued to you. So, for instance, we are now in that mode where we have to prepare ourselves for the publication of the list, the first list, the current list for the election. Now, so we are doing that. So, for example, individuals who have registered yesterday, we have to process and make sure that they're on the list, for that publication. Now, at that time, sometimes administratively, it might be sort of impossible to get all the cards processed. So a card was not issued to you at the time of election. I mean, we are saying that is possible. We are working steadfast to ensure that we minimize that, at all levels. But if that is the case, then of course that person can also come. So no one should stay away. Once you're duly registered and you want to exercise your right in the process, you come forward and you do so, and you'll be accommodated, of course, in the different step. We are asking electors, once you have your card, you come inclusive of that expired card. And I specify the expired card that with the expiry date of the 31st of January 2020. So in other words, somebody might be holding an expired card that was prior to the voter electronic system. This would not be allowed. So we are saying to you, come on that day, and it minimizes the process, in terms of how we flow. So it's important that people come on the day, come with your card, so that we can make sure that we can validate or we can verify who you are, but at the same time, we want to make sure that we can expedite the process and not have unnecessary delays.
Thank you very much. Colleagues, good morning once again. Anybody ready with their questions as yet? GBN, good morning.
Hi, good morning. Good morning to Mr. Morin. I have a few questions. For yesterday, was the amount of persons that turned up to be registered, was there a tally at the end of the day that you can perhaps present now as to the amount of people who got registered for yesterday? That's one. The issue of examination. Some of the schools, especially secondary schools, would be used as polling station, polling divisions, however you might call it. And we know that there are students who would have exams on that day. have there been any arrangements made to accommodate the exams and people voting at the same time? If so, can you explain? The National Democratic Congress, they're calling for a free and fair election. Can you address this as to perhaps allay any fears that there might be any, say, unfairness, if I might call it that, in the elections? I have more questions, but I'll leave it at that for now. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Christina. Your first question, it is sort of difficult for me to assert now the number of person or individuals that were processed yesterday in terms of the registration or replacement. I don't have that tally now in terms of your second question relative exams and elections. We are currently in conversation with the Ministry of Education, and subsequently we're going to make a pronouncement as to how we are going to address that issue. But as I said, it's something that we are aware of. We are very current in terms of our discussions and finding the best way possible, as to how we go forward. So I subsequently, I know we're going to make a statement in that regard. In terms of the question of free and fair elections, okay, we are governed by an act, all right, and the act has all of the rules and so on governing as to how we should do this, right? And so far, we are doing what we're supposed to do, all right? And whatever perception there is, we have to find a way to educate and continue to talk to the public, giving them the assurance and giving them all the necessary steps and guidelines as to how we go forward in ensuring that the process is as seamless as possible and within the rules, of the act by which we govern. So we are committed to this, right? And we will work steadfast to ensure that at the end of the day, the process is what it ought to be.
Thank you, Christina. Colleagues, anybody else with questions? Nancy McGuire, good morning.
Good morning, and good morning to everybody. I have a question about the communications of the Parliamentary Elections Office. There were a lot of people expecting to or hoping to get their new ID cards, and as it turned out, they didn't have to stand in line and do that. What are your plans going forward to ensure that people know what you're about and what you're doing and what you're not doing, other than just issuing a press release? Thank you.
Thank you very much for the question, Ms. McGuire. All right, so we have to continue to educate the public as to what is happening. And in all fairness, and let me just share it to the general public. We have since 2012, with the coming in stream of the electronic voters system, there've always been continuous registration, right? That's not changed. So then, in other words, for the last 10 years, or thereabout, just a little under 10 years, we have the act has been amended to facilitate continuous registration. As of the 3rd of February 2020, we were engaged in the replacement of expired card, right? So that is where we are. So we have to continue, and we have been talking in terms of with the public as to sensitizing the general public as to what are the requirements, what they need to do, how they need to do this, and in many ways that I think people are not very receptive to the fact that to get things done readily. I don't know why. For some reason, I wouldn't say that we are satisfied. I mean, we have to continue the work. We have to ensure that the public is sufficiently aware. But somehow people are a bit tardy in terms of coming out to do this thing readily. But there's a lot of work that we have to do to continue to educate, to ensure that, because, the strain and stress we had to go through yesterday could have been avoided, of course, if the message, or maybe we might say we need to look at our messaging a little more. In terms of if it was done the way it's supposed to, we shouldn't have been at that juncture, yesterday. So it's a lot of work to do to continue to educate the public, But we have to continue to work and make sure that everything is done in a manner that we all can be very proud of at the end of the day, because it's a collective process. This is not just about, yes, the electoral office is charged with that, but of course every Grenadian has a right to ensure that this process is one where we become very much aware and we do what we're supposed to do at the end of the day. So Nancy, there's some work to be done in that way, in that area, and we have to continue to work.
The other observations that people in line made was that there was just one person in the office dealing with these huge lineups. And they're wondering why there wasn't a backup. I know in one place, it was almost 6 hours before the person was able to take lunch. And had there been a second person knowledgeable in the process, that might have helped to speed things up. And then the other thing is that people were standing outside and didn't realize that they didn't have to be standing there. So I'm just thinking about, again, your messaging. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that observation. And in terms of the messaging, we have to take a cue from you in terms of what you said. I think we need to move forward in this direction as we go forward. But you said something at the end that people were standing, they should not be standing there. I'm not sure if I got that point very clear.
Nancy, can you just explain your point again, please?
Yes, sorry about that. Well, where I was, after lunch, somebody came out, I didn't know if they were an official, and announced that we should just deal with the persons that were not yet registered. And those that had cards didn't have to stand there to get their cards because they were eligible. But the people in the line that had been standing there to get their cards were not aware of this. And had they made that announcement earlier, I imagine a lot of people wouldn't have bothered to stand there for the next 4 hours to find out after lunch that they didn't have to be standing there in the sense that they could vote. That was the point. And the other point was, why isn't there two people that can perform those duties of processing new registrants? Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Nancy. Now, the part about having more people there. Now, we have to understand what the Act details in terms of that. And also remember that when someone, at every level of this process, you must take an oath to do that. So it's not like readily you could just say, okay, well, look, you have somebody. And it is clear that you have one system in terms of that particular office. And we have to make sure we manage. Now, remember, electoral processes are not treated because of the level of involvement and, of course, starting from the questions Kristalina talked about in terms of free and fair. We can't just change gears in the middle of a process. Right? That's what the process is. What I want to appeal to the public, however, is that we could have avoided that in the first place. All right, we could have avoided that kind of strain, having, the assistant registration officer and the registrar go through, if we had heed the call and do what we're supposed to do at a very early stage, right? But be it what it may, we had to accommodate, and that's what we had to do. Now, I went to a few offices myself, and I was just saying to people, well, look, if you already register, even if your card was not replaced, you don't really need to stand there if you don't want to. But there were people who made the choice that they were going to stay. So at least, and I think that was a common thing throughout, right? So there are people who made the deliberate choice that, look, I am coming and I'm staying. So that is where we are. But I am saying to the public, equally, we could have avoided that level of that influx, if we had, take the heed, in terms of what we were saying. And because even yesterday, just a preliminary check, there were people who were first-timers, but they didn't turn 18 yesterday. Right? There were people who, in the 30s, in the 40s, in the 50s, who came out yesterday for the first time. to be registered. And one may say, okay, look, that is your choice. You can do that. But at the same time, if we had taken that on board, we could have avoided what we had yesterday. I mean, at the end of the day, it ends well.
Thank you very much. Linda Streaker, good morning.
Good morning.
Are you there, Linda?
Yes, I'm here. Are you hearing me now?
Right, yes, go right ahead.
Okay, because I saw you said I was muted. I kind of missed the opening because I was not hearing, but then I realized it was my system had a little problem. So I trust that what I'm about to ask was not already said in his opening statement. If he do, my apologies. First of all, we are in it's not a season, but we haven't increased COVID cases. Has the Parliamentary Election Office considered any arrangement for persons who would most likely be infected with COVID on the day of election and may still wish to vote? The list that we're going to be using for this election, can you tell us when it will be finally published so that persons could look and have go through the process of objections and claim on that final voters list? And my other question is, last week there was an open letter to you from the opposition National Democratic Congress calling for free and fair election. And one of the things they highlight is the illegal registrations of persons in Karakou. I called and I was told that there have been Vincentians who are registering in certain polling division in Karakou. So from your office point of view, I also inquired and I was told if there is any objections to it and that was received, the office has a right to investigate those claims. Can you tell us if your office has investigated any of those claims and what has been the outcome? And finally, for now, the police list. The NDC also made mention of the police list for voting. Can you tell us if it will be published separately from the general list, be updated and published separately as to compare with the general list where the regular people will have to vote? Thanks for now. I do have more. I hope I get another round.
All right. I hope I got all the questions in the series. Now, you spoke earlier in terms of the COVID situation. Prior to lifting some of the restrictions, we engaged the Ministry of Health, and at that time as to how we go forward. Now, then we saw a lifting of some of the restrictions. We are now going to engage the Ministry of Health as to what we do and how we go forward in terms of that. I don't want to give, preempt or give premature suggestions, but I know we've started some very good discussion at the time when the protocol was very much different to where we are today. So that is something that we are going to discuss, and we're going to update the public subsequently as to how best, but in the meantime, we are asking persons to still be, you have to take personal responsibility to make sure that you protect yourself, you protect your loved ones, and make sure that you minimize the spread. I mean, people can get very sick, and next thing on the day of election, you're even too sick to even leave your bed to go out, So we're asking, the population to be mindful of that and to take the necessary precautionary measures. But we're going to engage the Ministry of Health officials, and we're going to make a statement in this regard as to how do we treat, for example, somebody who is positive, with COVID. How do you treat them and the day of election? I don't want to again preempt that, but of course it's a very much pertinent issue that we would have to articulate on, and make the necessary accommodation to make sure that, we can accommodate people in the best way possible. So I'm going back to the open letter and the issue of relation to people to Vincentian registering. Now, let me say first and foremost that our electoral laws make provision for a Commonwealth citizens to be registered. All right? No, and it is clear as to how that process is going to happen. So someone comes in, and that person have either the passport or the birth certificate, and they complete the declaration form and sign off by a GP. And then, of course, we would ask that particular applicant to provide proof, right, of his or her residence. Now, once this is done and we are satisfied, we have to process the person's application, right? And in this regard, what happens afterwards? Now, any person or any elector, somebody who is registered to vote, and the publication of that list now can object, right? And that is well within the law to object. In terms of getting objection specific to this, from the time I heard the clip, I don't know that I have seen an objection. What I can speak, I know prior to that, we've had, about 4 objections from Karakou that we are given, where the RO there is given a lot of, because the objection is a very detailed process. And you have to make sure you get it right, because just as how somebody object, I cannot arbitrary, because I am the one to remove somebody from the list. Even if, so we have to have sufficient evidence, we have to go through, we have to make sure we get it right. So it's something that is very detailed, and we are committed to work on it. But in terms of the last time when I heard that clip, I have not, none was brought to my attention in this regard, in terms of how we treat with that. Was there another question that?
Yes, she's asking when will the finals.
Oh, yes.
List be published?
Right. So as of today, the writ is issued. We have 14 clearees to present our first current list. There's a consolidated list of all the electors, right? So we produce that within that clear 14 days, and then it allows for a 7-day period for claims and objection as well before the final list for the election is published.
And she also asked if the list will be published separately.
Yeah, normally the police list is published in the police station and it's part of the consolidated list.
Thank you very much, Linda. Colleagues, anybody else? MTV, good morning.
Hi, good morning. Actually, what I have is not really. I have one question and then one concern that was raised this morning. For accommodation for blind people within the polling station, sorry. What accommodations you have for them? Because I know there are some concerns from certain blind individuals who they are uncomfortable being in there with somebody else and not able to do it on their own. And the other concern, somebody called this morning speaking about her son turned 18 today and he went in today. I know that you said the writ was issued today. Can you just address this quickly or clarify so that people can hear what the issue, they can clear it up in their minds, please? Thank you.
Sorry, the mic was off. All right, thanks very much for your question. The first one has to do with that was the first one again. The first one was the blind. The blind. Okay, yes. As it is, our act is not supporting like the secrecy in terms of a blind person, having been able to vote. So as it is now, they have to be supported. That's what our laws accommodate now. In terms of the person who turned 18, all right, the writ is issued. And once the writ is issued, all registration and replacement of cards cease. So it's unfortunate that, and I'm sure that's not the only person. There are other people who are sure turned 18 today. But the bottom line, that's what it is, and that's the rule of the engagement. So there are people who are going to turn tomorrow. There are people who are going to turn 18 before we actually come to the election day. But that's what it is. And certainly in many future elections, there'll be people who will turn 18, and either on the day when the writ is issued or after that, and they just have to wait for the next election cycle. So that's what it is.
Any other questions, Donella?
No, that's it for me. Thank you.
All right. Colleagues, anybody else with questions? GBN and Linda, I think you both expressed an interest in having a second round. So GBN, we'll go with you first.
Thanks again for another opportunity. I just want to ask the question, is there a review of the voters list? And I say that I know that people die from time to time, so are there updates that are done? If I missed that, my apologies.
Yes, Christina, there will be always update, right? And remember, we have to publish that list within 14 days, and it has to be as sterile as possible. So we have to make sure that we update, we are at a place. And that is why it allows for the 7-day also for claims and objections. So we make sure we get the list as sterile as possible. So the public has to help us here in this, in making sure that we get it, together.
That's it, Christina. Linda, good morning again.
Yes, my question has to do recently in the last sitting of Parliament, the Houses of Parliament, we saw the passage of two symbols. One with the Osprey bird power, we point out, but one, the smiling sun. Are you in a position to tell us who made the application to use the smiling sun as its symbol to be on the list of symbols to be used on an election ballot? And my other question is, what time did the offices close last evening? Did we? I realized that we would have had some offices going beyond the 5 o'clock closure, and once you're in the line, 5 o'clock remain. But did any of the offices go beyond 11:59 last night? And in my other question for clarity, which would be the final question, there was a video going around showing that only 100 persons were to be registered, I think, in St. George's South. What's your comment to that video, please?
Thank you very much, Linda, again. So let me answer the last question first, because sometimes I kind of lose track of those questions anyway. The question about 100 people, being allowed to register, that is far from the truth. As I said yesterday, what happens is that we opened at 9, contrary to what some people were thinking. We opened at 9 yesterday. We had to manage a process, and we closed. Our office hours yesterday were within that period. So like you closed at 5. At 5 o'clock, what we did in all our offices, where people were still there to be registered, we take the police manage with us, and we manage control. So in other words, everyone that was in the line at 5, we accommodate them going forward. So in some cases, we go way past into midnight because we had to do what we have to do. So we did that. And while I'm in this, let me also commend the police. I commended a few people when I started, but the police worked extremely hard with us to make sure that, things were managed in a particular way. So we were able to get this done, and if anybody left at any point, they left on their own accord. We didn't run anybody, and there wasn't a number. What we did is that a number was established after 5. You took all the people who were there, so a number was established. But that video, I don't know, what's the genesis of it. In terms of the symbol, no, I am not in a position to tell you exactly who was party or if it was an individual who requested. I can't give you that detail as we speak.
Colleagues, anybody else with final questions before we wrap up? All right, it seems as though they've exhausted all the questions. So, Mr. Moraine, you have a minute or two to make your final comments.
All right. Thank you very much again, and thank you very much to the media for your questions, your comments. Thank you very much to the reviewing and listening public. Now, let me say, now that the writ is issued and we are now preparing all that we need to do to make sure that we have free and fair elections, I want to assert to the public that we will be opening, that is for people to collect the cards, right? So that's all that would happening. There's no more registration. There's no more replacement of cards. So that's what you're doing now. So you're collecting your cards. So that will be as seamless. It's not as lengthy as when you go to register. So when you go, you make sure you carry your receipt that was given to you. And of course, you'll be prepared to take your fingerprint and so on again, and you go forward. So that is where we are. The office will be taking the cue from what Nancy said. We have to work to make sure that we inform the public, as best as possible. I must say, however, unfortunately, there are so many things being put out there. It's unfortunate. And sometimes when I look at the author of some of the things, it amazes me. Because these individuals know better. I mean, why is it that we're trying to create, some level of uncertainty when it's easier for us to really stick to the law and speak to the law? It's very unfortunate. And I want to say to this, yes, while I am the supervisor of elections, while we have an office running this, free and fair election is incumbent on everybody. For all of us to work together to make sure that it's free and fair. And we must do the right thing. That is, by whoever we can influence, we must educate. All of us have a responsibility to educate, people on it, and not to go out there and go on some kind of motif. Because, it's unfortunate. I see some people turn some very beautiful thing into something else, right, as to imply something. And then what is sad, there are some people who would take exactly what you say. They don't question, they don't fact check, and they go with it. I want to ask, all responsible Grenadians, let us inform, let us educate. We have been engaging people. Since I took this office, we have been engaging, right? And I think nobody could put their hand up and say, what, the office have not been engaging. You may not get the time you want, but we have been engaging and we're sharing, we're listening, we're learning, and we're working together. And I believe the only way we can do this, right, is for us to make sure we do what we ought to do. The day of election would approach, and we expect, of course, people to queue up, because we want people to participate in the process. We're asking people to observe that peaceful mannerism, go there and do what you have to do. And of course, engage in the whole electioneering, being positive, being clean. At the end of the day, I want to say to all of us, we are Grenadians. At the end of the day, we have to coexist. At the end of the day, there are bigger issues that we need to work on together. Let us not divide ourselves, and divide ourselves knowingly that the information we are disseminating is incorrect. I think it is something that we need to, and I really want to ask, of everyone, let us be responsible in this. I'm always open for dialogue. I'm always open for conversation, right? Because I want to make sure at the end of the day, this election is better than the one before. And we have to aim to ensure that every other election is better, and we can feel proud as to what we're going to do. There are some things, and I want to give early notice, that we have to look at. We talk all the time loosely about electoral reform. And for us to engage in true electoral reform, it's important that we understand that we have to be informed. Because let's not lose sight of the things that we ought to do to make sure that we have a process that we are proud of. Everybody has a part to play. And I think for us to do that, we need to start the conversation now. And of course, we must hit that constitutional reform. Because I don't know that we could do any true electoral reform without, of course, looking at constitutional reform. So it's something that we have to look at. We have to get ourselves involved. The other thing that we ought to do, and coming to some of the concerns people raise, once this election is over, we would have to procure a new software. There's no question about that. Look at this. I listen to the cry of the population relative to coming to replace the card and have to present all this document again. But that, unfortunately, that's what the system can allow, right? So we have to be able to get a system where we can upgrade your application, unlike having person to bring all the documents back again. So it's something that I think, in short order, we need to look at. There are some issues in terms of the boundary commission that we need to institute, so well, not really office, but these are things that we ought to work on in the long term to make sure that the process and the system is one that all of us will be proud of. All right, so it is a lot of work. I want to also ask of the public, when you go to the offices, please let us try to avoid unnecessary confrontation. I mean, it's pity, because really you have to pity that, because these young ladies, and we have one young man I call the rose among, the ladies, they work very hard, right? And sometimes, even without anything, you start with insults. And it's unfair. It's unfair to them to having to be subject. And if for some reason that they react to the contrary, they get flagged. It's unfortunate. A lot of people not are aware of the many individuals who come to the office and behave very, very, in a manner that is not civil. But what we see people talk about, okay, look, you go there and this, whatever. And the truth be told, there have been some stretch of the truth in some situations. Because we also we monitor, and people call and people say this, and I mean, sometimes people call, and I'm not trying to make an excuse. Yes, we've had situation where the system was down. We had situation where the office may not open readily. But here what people don't realize is that we can check from central office when our offices are open or not. So sometimes I see people call and they say things, and I say, but no, on that day we were open. And so, well, if it's not that day, it's some other day. I mean, we have to begin to really be honest in what we're doing and not paint a picture as though there's something we're trying. Because at the end of the day, these people who work, they are somebody's child, and they go home to a family. I mean, I can't say enough to really applaud the effort. Yesterday, right, I was up, I was calling around, I visited myself, I must say, hats off. For coordinating in some constituencies, we have two offices, two sub-offices, and kudos to them. I can't give enough praise to them. And of course, the staff at the central office, darlings, they have worked hard, and unfortunately this morning, I should have had Ferdinand Philip with me, but he had an emergency, so he couldn't be here. So I want to also apologize on the public, on his behalf to the public. So all in all, again, GIS and the listening public, I want to thank you very much for having us. And subsequently, we will update the public as we go forward, right? And issues in terms of what happens with, in particular, the health one that
and those of you in the diaspora as well. Thank you as well to all our colleagues who joined us via Zoom and asked their questions this morning. And I also want to say thank you to my colleagues in the room with me, Donnell, Ron, Carly, and Leroy. Thank you so much, everybody. Have a blessed day. We'll see you again very soon.